Those are the makers of a great comic. You're getting bullied, you're smaller. What you end up doing to survive is developing a very rapier wit and the ability to make people laugh.
I mean, I think that there are virtually no comedians out there who are handsome, well-adjusted, popular, come from extremely loving, affectionate, wealthy families. Those people tend not to go into comedy.
When Jon graduated from Lawrence High School in 1980, his classmates voted him best sense of humor. Still a bit of a nerd, he went on to attend William and Mary, a small college in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Jon went off to college in 1980, but he was pretty directionless. When he started out, he wanted to be a veterinarian, then he switched to chemistry and then psychology.
In college, you know, he spent half college over a bong, you know, I mean, that's his openness. That's kind of like the other side of Bill Clinton saying, you know, I never inhaled. It's Jon Stewart just admitting, yeah, it was part of my life.
I was not exceptional here and am not now. I was mediocre here, and I'm not saying aim low. Not everybody can wander around in an alcoholic haze and then at 40 just, you know, decide to be president.
Jon ended up graduating with a degree in psychology and returned to his childhood home. He took a series of unfulfilling jobs, including collecting mosquitoes for the state of New Jersey at $119 a week.
When I left William & Mary, I was shell-shocked because when you're in college, it's very clear what you have to do to succeed. You knew what you had to do to get to this college and to graduate from it, but the unfortunate yet truly exciting thing about your life is there is no core curriculum. The entire place is an elective.
At age 25, Jon saw his life in Jersey was going nowhere. He knew he was funny, and he knew he wanted to make people laugh. So, with very little money, he picked up and moved into a small apartment in Manhattan with dreams of making it in showbiz.
In 1987, Jon moved to New York where he was setting out to be a comic. And he dropped his last name, he said, because the MCs at these comedy clubs couldn't pronounce his last name, which really doesn't make sense because he's in New York, there are a lot of Jewish people there. Leibowitz is not that hard to pronounce.
Literally his first gig as a stand-up was at the Bitter End, which is where Woody Allen started, one of his heroes.
Stewart has said that his idols were, you know, Lenny Bruce, Woody Allen, Steve Martin, those kinds of people. I mean, clearly he you know, from an early age, cleaved to the smarter comedians.
You can see all of those influences in what Jon does. So here you got the nebbishy quality of a Woody Allen, the cool quality of a Lenny Bruce. Comes off a little goofy, like Steve Martin, you know, but at the same time poignant, like George Carlin.
Jon knew what kind of comic he wanted to be, and he was willing to pay his dues in the ultra-competitive New York club scene to get there.
Good evening and welcome to Caroline's on Broadway.
The two words that I use in comic is I killed or I died. Killing means I did great, and dying means I just did a poor job on stage. So it's kind of a dangerous occupation on stage.
It was a relatively grueling process, but you know, just people ask me even now, how do you become a comedian? But it's basically you write jokes, and the ones that work, you keep doing, and the ones that don't, you throw out.
When he first started, Jon used to express a lack of confidence in himself. Alan Havey at the time was the strongest act in town, and Esty, who books the room, remembers Jon wondering, will I ever be like that? And she's telling him, yeah, Jon, you will. But then pretty quickly he became a very, very strong act. And even at some point, I think he even began to feel it was so obvious that he was heading for something bigger.
Perseverance is key because you will get your chance in this business if you stick it out. And some friends of mine and I, when I first started doing comedy, ran into a very famous comedian. And one of them asked, what can you do to make it in this business? And he said, stay in the game. Just stay in the game.
Jon's game continued to improve. Nightly, he shared the stage with talented up-and-comers, including Dennis Leary, Ray Romano, Colin Quinn, and Janine Garofalo. The competition to see who was funniest was fierce, and it forced Jon to keep sharpening his act. After years in the smoky clubs, cable TV came calling.
In 1992, Jon hosted a show on MTV called You Wrote It, You Watch It. Basically what the premise was people would write in their own stories, things that had happened to them, and then it would be reenacted and it would air on TV. And that was it, and it was sort of weird.
Stairway to Heaven is one of my favorite songs because it reminds me of my first sexual experience. I was at the zoo. It was actually the first song I ever slow danced to.
The show didn't last long, and Jon didn't become a star. But he had become big enough to catch the eye of producers working for his idol, late-night host David Letterman.
There are a couple of meccas for every comedian, and in previous generations it was Carson. You got on the Carson show, you had made it. In this generation it's Letterman.
I mean, it's a big stepping stone in their career. You get on there, you get to do your 6 minutes of stand-up, and maybe you get to sit and talk to Dave, and Dave notices you, and then you get asked back on again. And the more you're on TV, the more you're known, and then you become a bigger star. So it works.
I went on Letterman and, you know, had a great time and felt really great and went home to my illegal subway. It was a lesson in this whole life is a journey, there is no made it.
Jon's refusal to rest on his laurels would serve him well as he continued to build his career. When Jon appeared on David Letterman for the first time in 1993, it not only announced his arrival as a talented comedian, it also put him in the running for one of the most coveted gigs in showbiz.
Letterman was going to jump to, well, eventually to CBS, and that left Letterman's old slot open. It came down to either Conan O'Brien or Jon Stewart, both of whom were relatively unknown at the time, and eventually Conan got it, which obviously would be disappointing to Stewart.
That's the worst feeling in the world, is to think you're going to get a vehicle and see it go to somebody else. I mean, that can really demoralize you.
Jon didn't have to lick his wounds long. MTV decided if Stewart was almost good enough to replace the king of late night, that he qualified as a younger, hipper Letterman on cable. And the Jon Stewart Show was born.
The MTV show was a little bit more of the hybrid that I don't think he had any idea was going to kind of inform later shows, i.e. The Daily Show, but you know, was much more informal and was t-shirt and jeans and a little more free-form, and really gave him the chance to be something different, which, you know, I think must have sort of planted a seed of what was possible on TV.
When Jon Stewart got his show on MTV, it was right around the time where MTV started to move away from a lot of music videos and started to add their own original programming. So it was perfect because he attracted the same kind of person who was watching the videos. It was a lot of cool kids in their 20s, maybe some teenagers.